great to have you with us, and we certainly have a lot of questions about this new format. So tell me this, what's the biggest challenge facing the league now as things get started in Orlando?
Well, first off, you've got to get everybody into the bubble safe, which sounds like a pretty easy thing, but we've got guys all over the country. We've got guys all over the world. We have a couple of star players who are out of the country right now. They have to come back into the country, and under the rules that are currently in the federal government, they would have to quarantine once they arrive. Then there's going to have to be another quarantine, and it may be a short one, but another quarantine when you get to Orlando. So the biggest thing that you do is building that bubble. But then the second thing is, if you're able to check all those boxes, get everybody in there healthy, can you maintain it? And as I've talked to doctors, like, this is going to require a bit of a monk-like existence. No friends or family, no significant others. You're going to be on your own, and you're going to have to follow social distancing, and that's going to be very difficult for athletes who are used to having freedom of movement, even during the pandemic.
I read yesterday, Brian, where the NBPA informed players that there will not be blood tested while in Orlando to resume the season, such as for materials that fall in the anti-drug policy. I was wondering, at first glance, I read that as weed. They're not going to test you for weed. But then I thought more about it. Is that a way to kind of smuggle in, through not testing for weed, the idea that they're not going to test for performance enhancers either? What do you know about that?
Yeah, they are going to test for performance-enhancing drugs. But I want to point out that there hasn't been any testing at all for the last 2.5, 3 months. So I don't know what you can do about that. But there will not be recreational drug testing. Players have randomized tests 4 times per season. So it wouldn't be like they would have been tested routinely anyway. But those tests won't happen. So considering they're locked in this bubble, and considering that, in the next collective bargaining agreement, there's a chance that marijuana could be legalized anyway, the league is going to let the players go on the recreational drugs. But they are going to continue testing for performance enhancing. And, they are going to get daily tests. And, the MLS just announced its protocol today. And the reason that that's important is because the MLS is also going to be at Disney World. And the MLS is going to be using tests that use swabs in your mouth or just in your nose. It's not going to use the thing that goes way up your nose. Still, they're going to have to do that every single day. And, I could understand why the players would also not want to have to go through drug testing as well.
Yeah, that leads me to another question that I guess I can wait till after this is over to ask you. But how are they going to get it in there? How we gonna? You brought up the word smuggling, but that's a different question, Brian. I'm really interested in the offseason. I think this season is going to shorten the offseason. Obviously, how do you think it's going to impact free agency in the following season?
Guys, we could spend an hour talking about next season. I just think it's a waste of time right now because there's so many different things that have to be negotiated with players about next season. Just as a reminder, and I know that this stuff is frustrating to fans because we'd rather talk about basketball, who's going to be the best team on the court, and we'll get to that. But because of this pandemic, the league has the right to void the CBA and say we're starting over from scratch, and they have until mid-September to do so. Now, they're not going to do that because they want to work with the players. They want next season to happen, but next season has to be negotiated. And as we look at the difference between the NBA and baseball, there's been a lot of comparisons made, but one is routinely missed. The NBA got 3/4 of their regular season in. They collected hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in revenue that they are dispersing to the players. Baseball has had no games. They have had no revenue. And that is one of the reasons why the fight has been more bitter. And I expect the negotiation for next season, forget about the date that it starts, the splitting of revenue and how they're going to deal with the losses, to be somewhat contentious and somewhat bitter. And so I don't think we can take any assumption as to what the offseason or free agency is going to look like at this point.
Wendy, obviously we're all excited for things to resume and to see this NBA season. But tell me this, from players that you've talked to, are they concerned about the rust factor in having this long layoff, or for a guy like a LeBron James, who's a little bit older, or Kawhi, who we know paces himself, they're looking at this as an advantage?
Yeah, there are certain. It is going to be amazing to watch various players on these teams who has weathered this storm and who has been battered by it, or what player may not want to play. I mean, one of the things that no one is talking about is if a player doesn't feel comfortable playing in this environment, we could see that happen. Now, Michelle Roberts from the union has talked to all 30 teams, and she says the overwhelming consensus is to play. The players have voted to return. Doesn't mean 100%. But when we see everybody show up and we start watching these guys play exhibition games in Orlando in a few weeks, we're going to see who is in great shape. We're going to see who is in not great shape. One of the surprising things that I've heard is that Nikola Jokic, a guy who is infamous for coming back from the off seasons out of shape, is actually in the best shape of his life. And so we may see whole swings of momentum with teams just based on conditioning and mental health. Not everybody's going to be in the best frame of mind in this bubble. We're going to find that out real fast.